very glad that you're doing well right now and you're kind of on the other side and you continue to advocate, which is kind of in the same position I'm in. I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit if you were aware of the risks of concussions at all through your dance career until you got it, and how has your education and your awareness changed since then?
I was not aware of the severity that concussions could go to, and especially in dance, it's not a common thing. Like you hear about it, like I feel like concussions a big thing in like hockey or more like physical contact sports. But dance, even when I went to the hospital, people would be like, "What do you mean you can't get a concussion from dance?" And I'd be like, "Well, I did." So like that was really surprising. Also, like I remember a lot in high school, I'd be like, oh, that person doesn't have to write their exam because they got a concussion. I wish I had a concussion. And it was like almost a joke thing because people thought that you just get headaches and you feel a little off and you get time off of school and it's like a break almost. And that's just not the case. And I really noticed that a lot when I was going through my concussion. It's like people just thought it was nothing, like, oh, they're overreacting, or I get headaches too. I have migraines and stuff like that. And it's just like, you're not understanding.
No, not at all.
No. So, um, I feel like there is really a lack of education on concussions, especially like even in schools and stuff like that. Like, I feel like people need to be educated better, but I feel like I've put myself in a position and my family's put themselves in a position to get that better education. And I think that if everyone does that, then it'll be easier for people that are dealing with concussion.
And you bring up a really good point. I mean, for the most of the guests I've had on this podcast have been hockey based because that's really my background. But we're starting to get more into conversations that have into other sports, and you really bring up a great point that you can get it in any sport or any situation. I'm wondering if there is a little bit of a stigma associated with concussions within the dance community, and if that's something that you experienced when you were involved in it.
Not like a little bit. I think that people kind of were like, that's not like in my dance experience, I had met like 2 or 3 dancers just within my studio who had suffered a concussion while in rehearsal.
Right.
And so I feel like it was like very unexpected, and people were always like, well, it's not possible. Like they couldn't imagine that like a pretty ballerina could possibly get a concussion. Um, so I think that it was almost like people believed it was more fake, or that it wasn't as bad as if you got hit in hockey or wrestling or any other physical sport,
Right.
which is hard in some ways because it's like you almost have to try and prove that it was possible and that it did happen instead of people just taking your word for it.
No, it's
So
very tough. And one of the questions I had is the idea that concussions are the invisible injury, and it's really hard to explain to someone else that they haven't been through it. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit on that subject.
yeah, that was probably one of the hardest parts because a lot of people would be like, you look fine. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not fine.
Not
Like, no, like lucky for me, I did have to walk with a metal walker and I did have to wear like giant headphones and stuff when I was in places. So people could identify a physical injury easier than when it was just my head, which I started with. People were like, you're fine. Like, you can do this. You're okay. You're faking it. And like, that was a thing that a lot of people would say to me, especially doctors when I go to the hospital. It's in your head. You're like, it's not real. And I'm like, what do you mean it's not real? Just because you can't see it on a scan, just because you can't physically see it on my body doesn't mean it's not happening.
Mhm.
Like, I was told that I just must have like a migraine or something, and I was stressed and it was my mental health and all this other stuff, and that just wasn't the case, and no one wanted to push past that. And like it even became self-doubting within myself. Like I would sit there and be like, oh yeah, like you're right, I probably am making it up. Like I want, like at the beginning you're like, yep, no, I hit my head, this is what happened. But then as time progresses, it's almost like you start to doubt yourself because that's what you keep being told. It's just such like it really plays on your mind, and it makes it like a much worse experience.
I
So
know from my own experience, it's extremely alienated. Exactly what you just said. Like you start to doubt yourself because you don't get that assurance from other people. Even as simply of saying like, you look okay. Well, it's like I don't feel okay because I know inside my head I don't feel okay. But if they've never been through it, they don't understand, right?
right, exactly. And to some degree, when it lasts for so long, you have to like try and live life to some degree, right? So that's when people are almost like, well, you must be doing better. It's like, no, but I can't sit and do nothing all the time, or I can't just let this completely debilitate my life
Mhm.
forever. I have to start somewhere. So like even like I would start being able to sit in and have conversations with my family. And they were like, well, you're doing better. You could actually sit with us today. Well, no, I just don't really want to have to keep walking away because I don't feel well. And so I feel like that's part of it too, is like if you start to try and do things more, people just like, oh, instantly better. But they don't understand
Instantly
that
think you're
after
done.
that, you have to like go lay down for hours because you just can't handle it.
I don't think like one of the things people don't realize is the idea of like reinventing your wheel and making your new normal. So they think that, exactly what you said, oh, you can do one thing, you're back to normal instantly. But it could be that take the most amount of energy of you just to walk down the street or just to say hi to some friends. Exactly like you said.
Yeah, it drains you a lot faster when you have your concussion for sure. Like simple things that everyone takes for granted, it's 1,000 times harder. And I think that was also one of the hardest parts, was just like, I can't do this, but I'm gonna try and do this little thing and hope it doesn't completely drain me. So yeah.
I'm wondering, what are some of the symptoms that you dealt with during your concussion recovery? And you said you're doing now good now. I'm wondering if there's any kind of post-concussion symptoms that you continue to deal with.
So during my concussion, I had the typical like headache, but when I say headache, it's like people think that I just mean like the headache that you would get when you were a kid to adult, whatever. I felt like my brain was on fire sometimes. Like it was never a normal headache, and no one could fully understand that. I was nauseous, threw up multiple times a day. Uh, Lights, sounds, everything just really got to me. My anxiety would increase due to all those symptoms. Along with that, my left side went completely numb. I could
Oh
not
no.
move it, could not walk. Um, so that was probably one of the hardest symptoms because I had a visual shift, which aggravated all my additional symptoms and caused the left side issue. So I just had a lot of different things. I got dizzy easily. Um, but yeah, mostly just like the left side, the headaches, the nausea, the light sensitivity, the noise sensitivity. Now that I'm better, I get set off if I have like a trigger in my um like routine almost. Like last week, for example, my fire alarm went off every hour
Oh no.
from 11 p.m. till 9 a.m. the next morning, with a flashing light, bright sound. And I woke up and like my left side was feeling funny. I was
You feel it
super
all right away.
nauseous. I was like, this is so bad. And I just, rested, um, tried to calm the nervous system, reached out to my few physicians and stuff and was like, what do I do? I'm supposed to be like 100%, but I still had this issue. I find if I get super stressed or anything like that, it's like it starts to activate. But yeah, I do definitely still have issues come on randomly, and it's like, oh, there's a reminder that I had my concussion, I had an injury, and I still have to deal with it every day and keep it in check, or else it's gonna come back and take over my life, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you're doing well now. And that's also a perfect lesson to anyone that's listening that, is kind of on that cusp of feeling better, not to just go, go, go the second you get better. Like you have to take it in moderation. And you have to learn that like it's something that unfortunately you are going to be dealing with the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
And so, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
it also just like is hard for me to get used to. Like I want to just go. I want to skydive. I want to do all my things, and people are like, you need to slow down. And I recognize when I have these little hiccups that I'm like, you're right, I do need to slow down. But it's also a hard thing to accept because once you start to feel better, you just want what you've been missing out on almost. You want to be able to go on a roller coaster or go to the mall or go to like a movie, even just something so small, but so big to someone that's been dealing with a concussion. You just want to go and do it. And it's almost like your family's scared for you and you're like hesitant because you just don't want to cause a flare up. That
For
makes sense.
sure. And a common theme that we've talked about on this podcast and we hear about in concussion recovery is the idea that there's a lot of trial and error with who you see, how you're going to get better, specialists. And when I was connecting with Tori from Shift Concussion Management, and she shared a little about your story, I was watching and here, there's a lot about that in terms of your mom and you speaking about just so much frustration and not being able to get someone that was on your side. So I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I first got my concussion, my family doctor was the one to diagnose me. And they were like 2 weeks, dark room, whatever. Like, it's almost like they're not educated, like unless they're in the concussion fields, like they're not educated on how to get you better properly or the new
Not at all.
protocol anymore. And I find that very frustrating because if they are the first place of contact, which typically they are, they should know what to do and they should be regularly updated. So she was just like, I don't know. And then she sent me to, no, I was going for physiotherapy and I had my left side flare up and they were like, I don't know what to do with you. So they sent me to their neurologist and their neurosurgeon and they were like, mental health, you'll get better. And I was like, that's not helpful.
Not okay at all.
No. And it's like, you didn't check, you didn't search for something else. You just went mental health. That's it. You didn't, maybe you haven't seen it before, but doesn't mean it's my mental health. Just means that you need to educate yourself further and figure out what's wrong. If you can't help me, find someone that can.
Right.
So I dealt with doctors like that for a while, went to the best hospitals around here. And every time I was told, it's your mental health, you'll get better. It's your mental health. Maybe you should see this like psychiatric place. And I'm like, you're not listening. Because my family and I feel that during my concussion, it can be a very hard experience, obviously. It can play on mental health for sure. There's no doubt in that. But I've always been a very positive person, and that continued through the concussion. Like, I broke down hard, maybe like 5 times throughout my 3 years of being concussed. And so it was clearly not my mental health. Like, I have family members that deal with mental health issues, and it just wasn't that. And so I constantly kept getting that. And then finally my mom was like, I found a place in Guelph. We're going to shift. And I was like, no, we're not. I'm not doing it anymore. I fought her on it. I was like, I can't listen to another doctor, physician, anyone tell me that I am not, like, it's my mental health and it's my fault, essentially.
Right.
And she, of course, made me get in the car and she drove me to Guelph. And they knew instantly what was wrong with me. They got me my glasses. They got me the help I needed. And they are why I'm here today in a better place. So thank goodness for my mom pushing through. But yeah, I was done because it was like at least like 15 doctors probably that had told me that it was in my head. And I couldn't hear it anymore. I started to believe it and it just wasn't good for me anymore. So I was very against it by that time.
Yeah, and you're already dealing with so much in your own head and in symptoms, and then to have all that on top of it just adds a whole other layer. And you bring up a really, really good point that it's so tough to deal with concussion because it's not just the person that's being affected; it's all the people around them. And from my own personal story, I'm the second person in my family that's had a serious brain injury. My younger brother fractured his skull. So my mom was exactly like your mom. She everything, tried this, tried that. I saw 5 or 6 or 7 different specialists before I finally saw someone. But it's exactly why I want to have these conversations to reach out to different people and parents that aren't like that and maybe don't understand why it's okay. So I wonder if you can just talk a little about that.
Yeah. So my mom is one of those people that they push through and they're like, she's not going to live like this. Like my mom was like, she's 17 years old. She can't live like this. Like this is just not her life. And I had a major support system. My family supported me. They bought me like little card games that are huge so that I wouldn't have to look at little ones and like I could play. My friends were amazing. They would come over and play like go fish with me because it's all I could handle and stuff like that. I had a huge, amazing support system. But even when I was being told at the doctors that like it was my mental health, like my mom fought against it, but I always in the back of my head was like, does she think it's my mental health? And she clearly didn't. She's not that person, nor is my father, nor my siblings. They knew that it was my brain injury and they knew me as a person and they were amazing. And it breaks my heart to think that there's people out there who don't have the support they need, who are sitting there like fighting with the people that are supposed to be supporting them, being like, no, like you need to listen to me. You need to help me. I can't do these things on my own. Like, I can't imagine even living on my own when my concussion happened. How would I go get groceries? How would I drive? How would I, and like, I think there's a lot of people in that position that they have to almost like aggravate their symptoms and make their brain injury worse because they don't have the support. Like they have to go out and drive. Meanwhile, you should not drive with a brain injury. 1, it's unsafe, but 2, it's going to make you feel a million times worse. Yeah. But they don't have a choice because there's no one being like, no, like you stay rest, I'll go do it. Or, like there's no support. And I feel for those people because I didn't have that. I had the best support system I could ever imagine. So I just hope that people, when they hear these stories and when they hear the family side of it and the patient side of it, that they're like, they check on themselves and be like, am I supporting my family member the way that they deserve? Am I giving them what they need? Because that's a big part of it. They can't recover if they can't take care of it themselves.
It's why it's very important that you do work like advocacy and tell your story. I know for my own sake, it really gave me a voice and it gave me some, passion and some just purpose in my life again. So I'm wondering if that's similar for you, if it gave you kind of a voice to be passionate about.
So for sure, I since I was young, I wanted to be a doctor. And I never I was leaning towards like dealing with autism and mental health and things like that, just from like my pathway in life. And then my concussion happened, and it was like, nope, this is what I'm doing because people are not educated, people don't know what's going on. Someone needs someone to understand. And I was like, this is where I want to be. It's the right thing, because when someone comes to see me one day when I'm a doctor, I'm going to look at them and say, I was you, and I'm going to help you. Like, I understand. And I think that's a really important piece. And so now I enjoy my advocacy and stuff because people need to know that it's not just a headache. It's not something that's just going to instantly go away. It's a big deal. Concussion, I feel like, has always been super brushed off, and it's like it's nothing. And that's just not the case at all. So whenever I get the chance, I tell my story. And I remember even when I was still with my walker and stuff, people would be like, that's not from a concussion. I'd be like, I hate to break it to you, but
Yeah.
it is, like, because people just don't understand. Or they go, oh, a concussion, it's not that bad. And that really gets to me. Like, it really upsets me. And so I advocate, and whenever I hear these things, I like shut them down right away, because I just don't want anyone who does deal with a concussion and is surrounded by those people to feel those negative thoughts. So it's definitely given me a voice. It's definitely given me a purpose. My life is now driven towards becoming that doctor and open my concussion clinic and having a very well-rounded facility, and continue to advocate for people with concussion or brain injury in general. So yeah.
I'm really happy that you can continue towards your goals towards that. And I'll add, it's very powerful to be able to hear someone just listening to your story right now. Like, it adds so much to it that you can, not just say you had a concussion, but really explain to someone and explain the things that they don't really understand.
For sure.
Do you think that, on a related topic, you brought up mental health? It's something we've talked about a lot with other people about hockey, because it's something that never gets talked about. So I'm wondering, do you think, does mental health get talked about at all in the dance industry? And do you think there's more that we can do in sports in general with mental health?
I think that dance does get touched on a bit more in like the dance community, because it's an art, well, a sport as well. Because you have pieces where you can express how you're feeling. Like, that's kind of the goal of dance. You get to express how you're feeling. So I feel like because it's such an expressive way and like a way to work through however you're feeling, mental health is brought up more. I think it still isn't brought up in a way that it should be. Like, I feel like people, like, in general, I think mental health is kind of still has that stigma behind it, where it's like you need to hide it and you need to be okay. And that's just not the case. Like, express yourself, tell people how you feel, let them support you. I think in sport, it's like you're an athlete, you're a performer, you're a whatever. So you have to pretend and you have to fake it. And it's just, that's going to impact one, your performance in the sport and or the activity or whatever. But two, it makes it like a much more negative experience. You're not yourself. And I think that really shows in your activity. So I think that mental health needs to be more of a priority and needs to be more focused in on in general in all sports and all activities. Because even though it's become more apparent in the last few years, it's still like people are still suffering silently
All of them,
and
for
feel
sure.
shamed. And I just feel like that's so wrong. Like, that's so negative. And mental health is something to be ashamed of. Mental health is something to recognize, claim, work through. It's like a physical injury. And I think that in sport, it's like, hey, your leg's broken. I can see it. You can sit out, have your day. But if someone's like, I am severely depressed today, I can't get out of bed, they're like, yes, you can. There's nothing wrong with you. And it's just like, that's not correct, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll add, like, there's that stigma associated where it's like if you're hurt and you should be out there, whatever sport you're playing, whether like if it's yourself or dancing, or for me when I'm playing hockey, you just feel like you're letting everyone down if you're not out there, and that's another aspect that people don't talk about because there's no one coaching you through that.
Right. Like, for example, when I did hit my head, I probably should have sat down and said, you know what, I'm not doing anything else for the night. But I didn't want to let anyone else in that room down or make them feel bad for me or anything. I was like, no, let's just keep going. And that probably did make my symptoms worse because I let them throw me. I let them, shake my head around more after just bashing it off the ground. And no one said to me, no, you need to sit. No, you need to stop. And no one said, it's okay if you need to stop. They just were like, okay, perfect, let's continue. And it's like someone needs to look at you and not make you feel bad because you're taking care of yourself. Like, it's like if my body isn't 100%, I still have to work as if I am 100% because I can't let anyone around me down. But in the end, you're going to get way worse and you're going to have to let somebody down because someone's going to tell you you're not allowed to continue. So I feel like it needs to be brought up like, if you don't feel well today, you need to sit. It's okay to sit. Like, you can support your team from the bench. There's no problem with that. So, like, even when I was full blown concussed, I went with headphones and sunglasses and everything. And I went to the competitions, even though they were terrible for my symptoms, but it was more for my mental health. I needed to be there and for support, feel like I was still a part of my team. I needed to be
Feel like
there.
you belong. It's very important.
Yeah. So I did go and I supported my team from the bench. And of course it wasn't the same, but I tried. And I feel like that needs to be recognized as good enough and okay and perfect. If you can't be where on the stage or on the ice or wherever, being on the sideline is still okay. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense with the story you just told about going to the competition. So when I got my really bad concussion, I was still involved with two hockey teams, and I used to go just show up all the time because I was the person I used to bring, because like I was the administrator. I brought the water bottles. I was the team captain. So it was way more than just playing hockey. It was my identity. And like I had all these people saying, "Oh, you're fine, get out there." So I just stopped going. So I'm curious on your for your own story. Uh, is there something you could talk about losing your identity when you aren't able to compete anymore? And this, if concussions add a whole other element to that.
I for sure during my concussion and when I couldn't dance and everything, I really felt like I lost myself and I still feel like I'm trying to figure out what I lost and who I am. I remember looking at myself in the mirror a lot of the time and being like, who are you? Like, I don't like, I looked at myself and I was so confused. And everyone's like, what do you mean you're still you? And I'd be like, I used to ask people in my family and my friends, be like, do you miss me? And they're like, you're right beside me. How can I miss you? And I was like, no, like me, like the person I was, because I'm not her. Like, and they're like, yes, you are. And I was like, okay, never mind. But a huge part of that came from not being able to dance. Um, I was there at that specific studio since I was 10 years old. So it was about 7 to 8 years at that point.
The big
They
part of
had
your
become
life.
my family. Yeah. Um, I went there 4 days a week for like 5 hours. It was a normalcy in my life. It kept me going. And those people didn't even continue to reach out to me, check in on me. Like I didn't see them anymore. And it was like I was losing friends and family, but I was also losing myself. It was just, yeah, it was like a complete wipeout of who I was. I didn't recognize myself at all. And it was like dance was one of the ways for me to express myself. And so if I was having a bad day, I'd put on a song that related to it and I would just move and it made me feel better. And I was like, cool, I'm good to go now. And it was like I would have all these feelings, especially dealing with a brain injury, and I couldn't express myself. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything to get over it. So it would just build up and build up and build up and build up. And I just felt like that was really part of an issue. And that's part of why I lost myself a bit. Not only did I lose people, but I lost myself because I couldn't move and I couldn't express myself. And even just that environment, like I missed like going to the competitions and getting pumped up backstage with my friends and like my mom running around doing my hair and makeup the morning before and just the whole experience. So that's why when I went to competitions, it was like I needed to be there because I needed to feel that family aspect again and see those people and hear the people like yelling for people on stage and smell of hairspray and stuff. Like I just needed the environment. And so it was very important for my mental health and my identity to go to those events, even though they typically did make me feel sad.
Yeah,
Um,
it's important to feel like you belong even if you can't. Like I know the same for me, just going to watch and not being able to play hockey was really tough. But like I find that, somewhat upsetting that I can relate to it, the fact that you had to like lose some friends and they didn't really understand. And that's really why I want to have these conversations, because I want people to understand that like they can be struggling and not look like they're struggling.
right, exactly. Yeah. And like it was like, oh well, when I see you in person, I talk to you. It's like that's great. But what about the times that I'm sitting at home by myself longing for someone just to reach out and make my day, And people are like, well, we feel uncomfortable talking to you. It's like, why do you feel uncomfortable talking to me? I'm still me. I'm just injured, you know? So, yeah, I feel like people need to know that, like, isolating someone more because they have a brain injury is not okay.
Not okay at all.
Because they are already isolated due to the fact they can't do things, due to the fact that they feel sick and they have to isolate themselves because they can't be around other people. But if you are a person that knows someone with a brain injury, reach out to them. Like, sure, people with concussion probably should not be on their phone and stuff, but you can go to their house. You can give them a phone call. They can sit and listen to you talk. You know, if they can't handle it, they hang up, they whatever. But make the effort so they feel loved and appreciated and not isolated like they are already.
And it shouldn't have to be like just talking to you, listen to your story, and every other guest that I've talked to, like there's that level of connecting because there's so much that I've been through that's the same, and it's frustrating the fact that if you haven't been through it, you don't understand. And to repeat that line again, it's really why I want to have these conversations, because I want people that are directly related to someone, whether that be a teacher, a boss, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a brother, a sister, a parent that doesn't understand, that needs to understand.
Right. Like my aunt, for example, has suffered a concussion for like 10 years now. Like she just can't get better because it's so far gone for her. Um, and I grew up with her having a concussion for probably 5 years before I got mine. I was just like, I don't understand. Like I couldn't understand. I would accommodate her, I would listen to her, I would try, but I couldn't understand. And then now her and I can sit and have really long conversations and talk about the different things that help our symptoms and aggravate our symptoms. And I can look at her and know how she's feeling because I've felt it. And I think that just really one helps her because I feel like she didn't have anyone that understood before, but two help me because now I can one help her, but two I felt supported along the way with someone that did understand, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, and it's great that you can support her. And I know for me, like now, anyone that reaches out and asks, I basically like, consider myself a concussion not expert, but I give advice to anyone. That the only thing is, I just don't want anyone to go through what I went through. That's just the simple line, truth.
Exactly. Yeah, like if people are like my mom, for example, gets a lot of people that reach out to her and they're like, I have a concussion, help, like I just need this or whatever. And she'll be like, Jhaelyn, this person's gonna message you because they just want to talk about how they're feeling. And I'm like, cool, no problem. And I'll talk to them for days. If they need any support, I'll check in on them. I don't want them to feel alone, and I want them to know what they're feeling is normal and okay, and that someone out there does understand and it's going to get better. You're going to learn how to live life in a productive way, even if it's not the way that you once imagined or had it. And there's avenues for help and stuff like that. Like I feel like a lot of people get defeated really fast because there's no like progress. But there's avenues out there that are going to help you and there's people out there that understand. And so I feel like that's one thing that I love. I love when my mom will come to me and be like, this person's going to reach out to you. I'm like, good. That's what I wanted. Like I will stop everything to talk to them because their way they're feeling is more important to me than anything else. I want to make sure that they're okay and that they understand they're not alone. I don't want them to feel the way I felt. It was a terrible feeling. I want them to be okay. So, yeah, I fully understand what you mean.
That's no, that's really great that you're able to have that voice and help other people out. I'm wondering just about one last question. If what's the one piece of advice or the best piece of advice you can give out to there that someone struggling with concussion?
Hmm. Well, my mom always says, don't give up, keep looking. That's her piece of advice.
I like
And
it.
I support that 100%. Um, I think mine would be Oh, this is a hard one. Definitely that, but also like know you're not alone. Just know, like, yes, people around you don't understand, and they can't understand. Even if they really want to, they can't because they haven't lived it. But you're not alone. There's people out there like you, like myself, who are advocates, and reach out to those people. And there's a community back there in the concussion world that's willing to reach out a hand and give you the assistance you need. Um, yeah, you're not alone. That's probably my biggest thing is you're not alone. And I'm gonna work to make sure that people know that they're not alone. That's the goal for me, I think.
That's great. It's a really great piece of advice. And I really think you have such a great passion and way that you advocate and just hearing your story. I'm so happy that you're kind of on the other side and doing better and not going through what you were going through. So I really do thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.